Welcome back, everyone. We are diving into one of the most exciting and, let's be honest, sometimes pretty nerve-wracking stages of pregnancy, the third trimester. We're working with excerpts that you all shared from swing2sleep.com's week-by-week guide, and even for someone like me who loves this stuff, there is a lot to unpack.
It really is jam-packed, isn't it, this trimester? I mean, big changes, obviously, milestones, maybe a few surprises along the way. I'm here to help kind of connect the dots between those really fascinating little tidbits from the guide and the bigger picture of what's happening with both you and baby.
Music to my ears. So swing2sleep.com, they jump right in, right? Weeks 28 through 30, they're calling it the home stretch.
Yeah.
They hit on those very real physical changes. Hello, stretch marks. And how baby's movements are becoming, like, impossible to ignore. It's getting real.
Yeah, it is. It's not just about size at this point. Like that third trimester ultrasound they mentioned, that's more than just confirming growth, you know. You're seeing organs mature, you can get a peek at brain structures that are developing. It's truly remarkable.
Speaking of remarkable,
Yeah.
the guide mentions babies start playing with the umbilical cord around week 29.
Yeah.
I have to admit, I chuckled when I read that. Who knew they were capable of that kind of coordination in there?
Isn't that wild? Like, it just seems like simple play, but it's really a sign of those brains developing so rapidly and their senses, too. Remember, up until now, their whole world has been, well, sensation and reflexes, right? So this playing, quote unquote, playing shows they're starting to connect like movement with feedback, which is a huge step.
So it's not just cute. It's a sign of all that wiring happening in those little brains. You're witnessing, literally witnessing their development in action. That blows my mind.
Mine too. And it sort of happens in stages, you know. You may have heard about babies sucking their thumbs in the womb. It's the same principle at work. It's practice. Practice for these essential skills that they'll rely on from day one.
Fascinating. Now, while baby's getting ready for the outside world, swing2sleep.com, they don't let us forget about the parents-to-be. They're highlighting the importance of gathering essential equipment, but they kind of poke fun at the tendency for new parents to go a little overboard.
Oh, yeah. It is new territory, right? And let's face it, there's a product for literally everything these days, my advice. Start with a list, like absolute necessities. Things like a safe sleep space for baby, basic clothing, diapers. Then, you know, think about your lifestyle. Like if you're mostly homebodies, you probably don't need that top-of-the-line stroller, right?
That's really practical advice. I can totally see how those baby owls can be completely overwhelming. All right, so moving into weeks 31 to 33, swing2sleep.com calls this the paperwork and the prep phase. And it's like they're speaking directly to my to-do list loving heart. I mean, nesting instinct kicks into overdrive, but then there's the grown-up stuff like parental leave, the hospital bag, adulting at its finest.
Right. And it's not even just about the checklists, you know. This stage is about feeling prepared and feeling empowered, knowing your rights, having those logistical things like, you know, the ducks in a row. It really allows you to focus on those more, I guess, emotional and physical preparations for labor and delivery.
So while we're talking about preparing, while baby's palate is getting ready, mom and dad have some serious paperwork to tackle. Speaking of baby's palate, the guide mentions babies developing a taste for sweet things around this time. I'm curious, does this mean they're, like, already developing a sweet tooth? Do they have preferences in the womb?
That's a great question. It's not really about a conscious craving for sugar. What's happening is around this time, their taste receptors are forming, right? And so they're starting to be able to perceive those different flavor profiles in the amniotic fluid, which, by the way, isn't just bland water. It naturally has this slightly sweet taste to it. And actually, this kind of prepares them to enjoy breast milk because that also has natural sugars in it, making it more palatable to a newborn.
Okay, so it's all connected and kind of amazing when you think about it. All right, fast forward a few weeks and things are getting real. Weeks 34 to 36, the countdown is on AN. Swing2sleep.com explains that baby is considered ready at this stage, even though full term is still, you know, the goal. They also mention that sensation of the baby dropping lower in the pelvis, not always the most comfortable feeling, I imagine.
You're right about that. It's all part of the process, though. The baby's literally getting into position. Your body is prepping for labor. And this is often when a lot of parents start to really think seriously about pain management during labor, you know? And the guide specifically mentions avoiding episiotomies, which is a common concern for expectant mothers. Now, for those listening who might not know what an episiotomy is, it's basically a surgical cut made in the perineum, that area between the vagina and anus, to widen the vaginal opening during delivery.
It's great that the guide brings this up. And they actually suggest perineal massage, which, full disclosure, sounds a bit intimidating to me. What are your thoughts on that?
I can see why you'd say that. Perineal massage is really about taking control and having these open conversations with your healthcare provider. There's just no one-size-fits-all answer when it comes to, labor and delivery. So being informed and advocating for yourself is key. Discuss your concerns and preferences with your healthcare provider so you can make those decisions together that are best for you and your baby.
That is such a crucial point. Knowledge really is power, especially when you're talking about like navigating something as important as childbirth.
Absolutely. It helps you make informed decisions and, just feel more confident throughout the entire process.
Okay, so getting back to our deep dive here, weeks 37 through 40, it is almost showtime, officially. Swing2sleep.com. They cleverly call this section Showtime, maybe? And I love that, like, they're keeping it real. They even dropped this truth bomb. Only 4% of babies are born on their actual due date.
Yeah, it's so true. I always tell people that due date, it's more like a due month, really. Especially for first-time moms, going past your due date is actually surprisingly common, and oftentimes there is nothing to worry about.
Which I'm sure is reassuring because I would imagine the anticipation at that point is, like, through the roof. However, the guide also talks about those, like, sneaky prodromal contractions, I think they're called, that can totally feel like the real deal.
Oh yeah, for sure. Prodromal labor can definitely throw you for a loop. They often feel like real contractions, it's true, but they tend to be irregular and they don't consistently increase in intensity. It's basically your body doing a little practice run, getting ready for the main event, but it can be so hard when you're in it to decipher, is this it or is this not?
It really does. Okay, so kind of want to, like, rewind a bit to those earlier weeks. Swing2sleep.com, they had some really interesting insights about how the baby's senses develop during the third trimester. One thing that stuck out to me was how they emphasized those senses actually becoming like more acute, especially around like weeks 28 to 30.
Right. So around this time, the baby's brain is going through just this incredible growth spurt, particularly in areas that are responsible for processing sensory information. So they can actually hear a lot more clearly now. They can even recognize your voice. Their vision is improving, and they're becoming more sensitive to things like light and touch. And all of this is basically just their way of prepping, getting ready for life outside the womb, where, they'll be bombarded with all these new seats and sounds and sensations.
And, remember how we talked about the baby playing with the umbilical cord? The guide mentions that this is not just a coincidence. It's actually a sign of, like, those motor skills developing.
Exactly, yeah. They're not just, randomly moving around anymore. They're developing coordination, muscle strength, those are really important reflexes. This is also around the time when they start practicing things like swallowing and sucking, which, are essential for, like, breastfeeding or bottle feeding once they're born.
Really is amazing to think about everything that is happening in there. Speaking of incredible feats, the guide also emphasizes the importance of mom taking care of herself during these, final weeks. And they even talk about how things like cuddling and massage can actually benefit, both mom and baby. Sounds like a win-win to me.
It is a total win-win. Self-care is so important, and it's not selfish, especially during pregnancy. Touch and just like relaxation in general. It releases oxytocin. A lot of people call it the love hormone. And this not only helps you feel good, but it actually crosses the placenta and can have a really calming effect on the baby too.
I love that. Now, while we're like celebrating the feel-good moments, let's be real for a sec. The guide definitely doesn't shy away from some of the less glamorous aspects of the third trimester, such as, the fatigue, the back pain, those oh-so-frequent bathroom breaks.
Yeah, those are all very, very real, aren't they? But totally normal. It's completely normal to experience those things. As baby grows, it puts pressure on your bladder, hence all those extra trips to the bathroom. And that growing belly can also shift your center of gravity, which can often lead to, back pain. So the key is to really listen to your body, rest when you need to, and absolutely don't hesitate to reach out to your healthcare provider for support if anything feels off.
That's such good advice. The guide also talked about like the importance of prenatal visits during this time, and they mentioned that around week 32, your doctor might actually start doing something called a cardiogram or a CTG. What exactly is that?
So a CTG, it's basically a non-invasive way to monitor the baby's heart rate and the mother's contractions. So it's a pretty simple procedure. They basically place two belts around your belly. One of them detects the baby's heartbeat, the other monitors contractions. And this really helps your healthcare provider get a sense of, the baby's well-being and kind of assess if labor is like progressing as expected.
Okay, that makes sense. And it sounds like it could provide a lot of reassurance for everybody involved. Now, speaking of labor, the guide does provide like helpful tips for preparing for the big day, like things like, packing a hospital bag, practicing relaxation techniques. Have you found like those to be helpful for expectant parents?
Oh, absolutely. Feeling prepared can go such a long way in reducing anxiety, just helping you feel more in control. It's never too early to pack that bag, things for you, things for the baby. And even, writing down any questions you have for your healthcare provider is always a good idea. And of course, practicing relaxation techniques like deep breathing, those can be so helpful both during pregnancy and labor.
All fantastic points. One thing that stood out to me in the guide was like their emphasis on the baby's lungs developing throughout this trimester. What's actually happening there?
Yeah. So lung development is crucial during this stage, right? It's actually pretty amazing. A baby's lungs, they're actually one of the last organs to fully mature. And that's why, babies who are born prematurely sometimes need a little bit of extra help with breathing. The guide specifically mentions that in those last few weeks, the baby will start producing something called surfactant.
Surfactant. Okay, yeah, it's coming back to me now. It helps, like, their lungs actually work properly, right?
Exactly. It's pretty amazing stuff. Surfactant, it's basically this slippery substance that reduces surface tension in the lungs, and this makes it easier for those tiny little air sacs to inflate and deflate with every breath. So basically essential for a newborn to be able to take that first breath and, breathe on their own.
Wow. Our bodies think of everything. So remember how we talked about like the baby dropping lower, getting into position? The guide mentions that this can actually make breathing easier for mom since, baby's not pressing up on the diaphragm quite as much.
Right.
But I guess there's a trade-off, right? More pressure on the bladder.
Right. Like we said, it's all connected. But yeah, I mean, those extra bathroom breaks are a pretty small price to pay when you really think about what your body is doing to prepare. It really is remarkable.
It really, really is. And, speaking of those final preps, the guide also has a whole section about what to expect during labor and delivery. I did appreciate that they don't shy away from, like, the possibility of a C-section, which honestly, I feel like that's something that every expectant parent should at least be prepared for. What are your thoughts on that?
I completely agree. It's so important to keep in mind that every birth is totally unique, and sometimes a C-section is just the safest option for both mom and baby. Whether it's, planned in advance, maybe because of certain medical conditions, or if it comes up unexpectedly during labor, having that knowledge about the procedure can be really empowering.
Absolutely, yeah. Being informed always helps to, like, alleviate some of that fear of the unknown.
Okay, so as we're wrapping up our deep dive into, this incredible final stage of pregnancy, I think one thing that really stuck with me was the guide's focus on the emotional aspect of this trimester. They acknowledge the excitement, of course, the anticipation, but also the possibility of like anxiety being there too, or even some fear. Oh, absolutely. It is a roller coaster of emotions. There's no doubt about it. I mean, this is a huge life transition, physically, emotionally, and it's completely, totally, 100% normal to feel this whole range of emotions. Just remember, you are not alone in this. Talk to your partner, talk to your healthcare provider. Even a therapist can be really helpful during this time.
Yeah, I think that is such an important message. Like, you're not alone. And I know we've covered a lot today, so if you're feeling a little overwhelmed, just remember to breathe. Take it one step at a time. And hey, maybe even revisit this deep dive, when you need a little refresher or a little dose of reassurance.
Exactly. And never, ever hesitate to reach out to your healthcare provider with any questions, any concerns at all. That's what they're there for. They're your partners in this whole journey.
They really, really are. Okay, so as we bring this episode to a close, I always love to hear, like, what stood out to each of us during the deep dive? Was there anything that particularly surprised you or, like, got you thinking in a new way?
I have to say, I'm so used to kind of like the clinical aspects of pregnancy and birth, right? But what really struck me was that detail about the babies, playing with the umbilical cord. It's such a simple little thing, but it really is this powerful reminder that even in the womb, these little ones, they're already developing these unique ways of like interacting with the world around them.
That's a beautiful way to put it. For me, I think it was that statistic about only 4% of babies actually being born on their due date. Really just underscores the fact that, at every single pregnancy, it unfolds at its own pace. And kind of letting go of those rigid expectations, I think, is key to really embracing this whole final chapter.
Could not agree more, seriously. Flexibility and self-compassion. Those are your superpowers during this time.
So true. And on that note, I guess we'll leave everyone listening with this. What surprised you the most about, like, this whole week-by-week breakdown of the third trimester? What resonated with you? Just, hold on to that curiosity, that sense of wonder as you navigate these last few weeks of your pregnancy.
And remember, you've got this. Trust your body, trust those instincts, and enjoy the ride.
Beautifully said. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the third trimester. We'll see everyone next time for another fascinating journey into the world of knowledge.